program. The first thing, just to get started, my first question I have for you is, based on, as I just said on the outset, this is obviously a very popular and hot topic, and maybe that means there's a lot of frustration and confusion with the topic. Just from your perspective, before you get started, why do you think today's session is so widely attended?
Well, hey, Rick, thanks so much. Thanks for the good introduction, and thank you all for attending today and listening to some thoughts about problem management. In answer to your question, Rick, it's a bit of a surprise in a way that there are so many people registered for problem management. It might just be that we're all interested in the Thought Rock lunch series and happen to all coincide on the same day, or there might actually be out there. I know from my work experience, problem management tends to be an area that's either skipped over or in some way, people are always struggling with trying to justify having problem management within an organization and what it should look like. So, a number of different, and this is sort of, I guess, a part we'll just start off with. Just with our main topic here, problem management and the overall process design. I think with problem management, I think a lot of the confusion happens because we think of it like another ITIL process, like incident management. And although it is a process, it's something quite a bit different than incident management, which is part of the introduction I'm going to start off with today. They're the same, but they're definitely two distinct and different things. So I don't know if you found yourself, Rick, out there in the business world. Have you found companies struggling or just not paying attention to problem management?
Yeah, I think inside or outside of IT, I think it is a continuous problem. I mean, it's also understanding process versus skill set in terms of the requirements to pull it off successfully. I think you're going to talk a little bit about that, and you and I have talked about it significantly in terms of the process piece, but also the skill set to good problem management. But I think that there's still a gap. I mean, within our own group, within our own IT folks, I think that is always going to be a challenge in terms of what is good problem management, and not only good problem management in terms of how problems get solved, but also how efficiently they get solved. So hopefully you'll talk to all those things.
Yeah. So let's start off. Let me jump in here to our agenda for the day. Well, not the day, the lunchtime. And the appropriate part to start with, which fits into what we're just sort of starting off with. What are we managing exactly when we're talking about problem management? So we'll have a couple of slides and get some good discussion, and I'll add a few scenarios to that piece too. Because this is really, I think, the key from what folks are looking for about problem management and how to get traction. And then we can get into the problem goal itself. So once we know what we're managing, we can figure out, okay, well, here's the goal of problem management, and now that we've got our head straight, we can achieve that goal. A couple of key success factors. I could spend a day on success factors. We'll just look at the top 4 or 5. And then we finish off, as I've done with many of these different process topics, just a discussion around, once you start writing it up, what does the process documentation look at? And then again, just a bit of a recap with our approach and kind of recommendations about focus. And if we have time, we'll do a simple little walkthrough and a wrap-up. But I think we'll be able to get a bit of a discussion happening around that first topic about what exactly are we managing. So let me jump into my slide number 7 here. And the first thing, we need to get a couple of the definitions out of the way, and then we need to think about, again, going beyond this and really getting a sense of what is it exactly we're managing. Once we get that, then we'll be answering a lot of questions, I hope. So the basic definition of problem management. So this is just I'll give a little underlining up here. Just the generic ITIL definition. It's the unknown cause of one or more incidents. So this is where I found, I think traditionally people get a little bit of that initial confusion. Because if you don't have an incident, you don't have a problem. So where exactly is the crossover? So too simple a definition for problem management. Let's take a look at this next little piece. I'll just put a marker down here. So let's remind ourselves about exactly what an incident is, because without an incident you don't have a problem. So it's a deviation from normal. And it can be one of three subpoints down here. Something that causes a failure to a service, so clearly needs to be repaired. Something that causes reduction in the quality of a service. So these are your latency issues where I'm trying to process a batch file. Normally it takes me 10 minutes. It's now taking me an hour. And that's not a normal level of service. And then all of our event management and event alarms, we have thresholds reached on my servers for disk space remaining. And if that trend of using up disk space continues, I'm going to either cause a reduction in quality of a service or cause an absolute failure.
So Graham, is this?
Yeah.
I would think, is this why there's so much confusion? Would you, in your opinion, is there so much confusion among many? I mean, some on the line would argue that this is perfectly clear for them. I think there's others, based on some feedback we've got leading up to the pre-registration in terms of what they were looking to get out of this session. Is this, just looking at these definitions and the semantics, is this where you'd see there is confusion between when an incident and when it's a problem? It sounds like the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that's it, because by definition, a problem is an unknown cause of an incident. We're talking about two things at the same time. And so I really think, you know, what I've seen out there is that people focus on, out of our incident management process, we have a lot of staff there, and they're going out there, they're trying to restore service as quickly as possible, and they're trying to figure out what went wrong and get it all patched up. So the question kind of follows, so why do we need problem management? Incident management restored things and got them back to normal. And so why do we need to go and have a separate process, take a separate look at these things?
Graham,
So,
great question, actually. There's a great question just in line with what I just said. I want to bring a question from one of the participants right away because I think it helps. So I think what he said, the gentleman here is saying is, what's the difference then between a major incident and a problem?
Actually, that's going to probably lead into my next slide. The difference between a major incident and a problem is just the follow-on type of activities of how long do we keep looking at potential causes. So let me bring up this next slide, because I think it's going to talk to that, that whole thing about, you know, if you have a major incident, when does it slip over into problem management? And as I've prepared this presentation, my way of thinking, and sort of the way I want everyone to kind of open their mind up to, is that scope is the important factor. Again, incident and problem management are closely related, but you're going to have, you know, the first little bullet point here, far more incidents and problems, and we can investigate every single incident. So here's where we need to look at, I think I have another part to my slide. We need to have a definition going from one to the other of what is significant in terms of an incident that requires a separate problem type of activity. So,
and Graham, I think I'm going to ask you for, I think you're going to lead into this. You're going to talk to potentially a scenario that makes sense here. And again, you and I have talked about this, and from my perspective, I was trying to get my head around this as well. So from what you just talked about here, there are incidents that are seen to be, are often called problems, but they're solved immediately. They become a known error, and that known error has a workaround. Oftentimes, for whatever reason, that's just okay to leave that known error with a workaround for anybody in the support team. There's other incidents that need to be moved into more problem management. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, and you know, here's a great place, like you say, where I'll put a couple of scenarios in, because again, we need to get right from the start. We need to understand exactly when is it incident and problem, and when are there separate activities and how are they different. So let me start off with something really simple, and I've used this many times in different training sessions I've done. So we have an office printer or a department printer, and for whatever reason it stopped printing. We've got a failure. So in the flow of ITIL, users call the service desk. That triggers the incident management process. Out go our level service desk can't handle it, so I go our level 2 technicians. They go to the printer, and then if they're following good incident management, they're making a quick assessment. So not to mix words, but they are looking for the problem that caused this printer not to work. And if it's not apparent, good incident management says reboot it or remap all those users to a different printer. Don't keep them waiting. Right? So incident management, you've got fire under your feet. You need to act quickly. So if we continue with that scenario, let's say our level 2 technician has gone out to the printer. Nothing is really apparent. They've tried the traditional reboot, and that hasn't solved the incident either. So they right away start going into a workaround, and they remap the users to a printer in a different department or a different printer. So, so the incident now, and this is, I think, where the confusion is. So are we now saying we should trigger problem management? And I would say no. I would say here's a case where the incident, the level 2 technician, once they've mapped the users to a different printer, they're still under their incident management process, and they still have some timelines. Maybe this type of an issue allows them 30 minutes or an hour to try and work on. So they go back and they work on that printer. Maybe they go and pull a few things out. They pull out the toner, shake it a bit, put it back in, and maybe that solves the incident. The printer gets back up and running. So then they can map the users back to that printer, and now we can close that incident ticket, and we're done. So in that little scenario, here we have incident management, and we don't have problem management. Even though there's investigation going on after users have an alternative, but it's small in scope, and incident management should hold on to those things. So where this could trigger over into problem management is that this printer does this every week. So my technicians go out every week and they learn all the tips and tricks to do quick workarounds. But now someone needs to say, we should have a longer, more determined look at exactly what's going on with that printer, because it's starting to cost us time and money. And now that's the trigger to say problem management should be notified, or they should identify the trends of incident tickets saying that, hey, we've got a lot of repeat type of activity happening, and now we need to get involved. So with that little scenario, hopefully that starts to turn on a few light switches in people's minds. Problem management needs to have scope. And I don't have a separate slide for this, but here's where I think I could have another discussion, that incident management is very technically driven, right? And very much staffed. We have a service desk, we have level 2 general support people, and then at a level 3, we pick and choose from throughout the organization, and we're looking for people with technical skills to try and resolve an incident as fast as possible. When it comes to triggering problem management, in my view, doesn't have a big pool of staff. In fact, they have pretty much an administrative staff to administer the process, and problem management is more business and decision-making focused than it is technically focused. So around that concept, and this goes back to the example and scenario with the printer, so here we have problem management. They're starting to notice that this repeat incident on the same printer is starting to cost time and money, and they can prioritize it. They're the masters of knowing all the different problem investigations going on in the organization, all the different services and service levels being affected. So they go out there and say, this is business significant. This is justified to go and take some people out of the organization and have them work on that printer for a day, trying to figure out why is this repeat type of activity that's costing us time and money, why is it happening? So problem management makes business decisions before it engages staff, the appropriate staff, from throughout the organization. And this is the real big difference between problem and incident management. So problem management doesn't have a staff of problem solvers. In my view, problem management goes out to the organization. When you find something significant, it could be any number of things. Then you go out and you find the right resource, you assign them the task, that resource shouldn't be solving incidents at the same time because they'll be distracted. And this is where I think where I've seen companies kind of fail is that they think problem management has to have the skill to solve problems, when really problem management, in my view, is a business decision maker about saying we need to tackle something, we need to assign resources, which is going to cost us money, but the payback is worth that time and effort. And then
can I just interrupt you on there?
Yep.
Quick question on that, because I think it's a great point. Because again, from my perspective, looking from the outside in on problem management and putting my business hat on. So in your simple scenario, and again, we can think of scenarios that have significantly more magnitude of disruption and cost. But in this, it is good to use a simple example like the printer example. To me, though, within problem management, the process still has to require that there is some level of rules applied to solving the problem. So using your example is you've got a number of solutions that could come into play. One is throw the printer out right now, because every minute spent repairing that printer, we could basically replace the printer cheaper. The second thing is, do we really need? Why not just reroute everybody to a new printer? Why are we spending any time worrying about this old printer anyway? So my point, though, still is that, and we see this in business often in IT, is are there rules in problem management for people doing this to make decisions and make them efficiently without spending so much time on solving the problem and end up, the business case is kind of silly by the end of the day.
Yeah, it goes back to the process flow and where you want to put the emphasis on different activities of that flow. So where I've been sort of coming from at the very start here is that right at the top of the process flow, you need to make a business decision of, do we need to do activity or not? And then as you go down and you start assigning activities to people throughout the organization, then once you get into the investigation activity, you need to make an assessment of saying, we are problem management, we're the focus of problem solving. We should probably invest in some training and also learn some tips and techniques that make people good problem solvers. Because typically in IT, we're great at firefighting and we're not good at problem solving. We tend to overlook sometimes obvious things, or we don't go through specific sequence of tasks. So here's where the process, and again, here's where people might focus on more than they should, but the process needs to focus on this whole thing about how do I make good problem solvers, and how do I make sure if I have to assign work to people, for the printer example, that I assign work to someone who is a good problem solver, not someone who says, oh, it can't be anything to do with the toner, so I won't check that. Right? A good problem solver looks at all the options, and they have a way of doing a process of elimination. Because who knew, right? IT is a strange thing. Unusual things cause outages or reduction in service. And, you need to go through a thorough investigation. That's why we have problem management.
No, that's great. So, that's why I wanted to get clarity on that, because again, from my perspective, from what I see in terms of ITIL training and the typical curriculum around this sort of stuff, the piece that's still missing is exactly what you just articulated. At the end of the day, at the end of if the process is followed properly and we get to that point, is there still needs to be effective decision making and effective skill sets to make those decisions, so it doesn't cost the business more money than it's worth to solve that problem.
That's right, and that's why I mentioned that right now in here, because that right off the top of the process flow, problem management is a decision-making process. It needs to say, yes, we should look at this, or no, we shouldn't look at it, and here's the business reasons why. So maybe that's a bit of a different thinking than traditionally most people have viewed problem management. They probably get a little bit of scope creep and overload because they try and investigate too many things. But if you have a business rule saying make it business justified, it helps. If this printer only fails once in a while and shaking the toner or rebooting it seems to solve it, that's a very inexpensive use of time, even though we have to send a resource out there. And it might not be it's not business justified to have a separate problem activity. So just while we're on this too, and again, just based on the questions coming in, I don't have any specific slides for it, but the next piece too about the one question you mentioned, what if you have a major incident, when does problem management get involved? So let's say we have our network down, and of course incident management goes out there. Everyone is all hands on deck. We have a major incident. And the ITIL philosophy would be that now's a good time to involve problem management, and I would agree as well, because the fact that your network failed, your network is mission critical. It shouldn't fail. So we have the firefighters, the incident management process, going out just trying to get things back to running order. And they're overlooking a whole bunch of possible cause and effect. So we need a separate team who's going to stick with this long term to do an investigation, who in parallel, while everyone's running around trying to get the network back up and running, they're asking the questions, what caused this? And hopefully we get the network up and running sooner than we get to the answer the question about what caused this, because the fact that it's a major incident, my recommendation is that every company should have a basic policy saying every major incident should always be investigated by problem management, because we don't want that to recur again. And there's a good business justification for it. It's mission critical. A P1 shouldn't be something that's not, or a major incident shouldn't be something that's not mission critical. So let's move on to a couple of other slides that that might bring this up. And I do have a slide that talks about this major incident policy, where it's business justified to investigate and start right away anytime you have a major incident. So if I jump forward a little bit, let me just go to my next slide. So let's keep in mind now, we know what we're managing, and we know where the crossover is. It's a business decision about when we trigger problem management. So then we can go into the more known and familiar things in problem management, which is our goal and objective. So we want to prevent problems, which are these bugs or major distractions, from happening again. If there's a recurring pattern, we need to get rid of that basic bug in our system that keeps on triggering incident management. And at the same time, the traditional problem management approach, always look for a workaround, try to minimize the impact of incidents that can't be prevented, because if we're going to go and spend time and money investigating in problem management, one of the things we should do is you can't always spend money to fix everything. So look at the better workarounds, which will shorten incident management, and in that way save us time and money. And then here's my own little addition down here, because I know that to make a process successful, you need to make sure that you have records and tickets. So these are the things that form a knowledge base that can be searched by incident management and problem management to get better at solving problems and shortening up incident management. So if we do all these things, this is more of the process and min type of activities. But again, if you keep that focused on what we're managing, significant incidents that are business justified to have that next step, then these goals apply to those business justified significant incidents. So what we'll do, I'll just wrap up, get towards the wrap up. I won't go beyond our 12:30. Couple of key success factors that I found for incident management. The service desk. So it was also a key success factor for incident management. They're creating all the tickets. They're searching knowledge bases. If you want to know what's happening on a recurring basis and is really annoying your users, the service desk. They know the user community. They know the business. So they're a great source for problem management to try and figure out, what are the big significant incidents out there that problem management needs to do a little business case on to say we should investigate or not. So, so it's critical. I mean, the service desk really does make a difference for both incident and problem management. Of course, all of those tickets are huge trending reports that allow problem management as well as incident management and the service desk to know what's going on. What's the heartbeat of our organization and what's unusual. So here's where we can get volume to try and build a business case to say we need to do a problem investigation. I've got two things here, priority tables and categorization tables. Problem and incident management are so closely related, you're going to be using the same things. And we want the same language used throughout the organization. So this is more of a common ITIL critical success factor, but applies just as readily for problem management in our presentation today. The other key concept is the known errors database. So this is basically all of my problem activity and all of my knowledge I'm building up needs to be shared. So no matter how you do it, you need some type of search engine and knowledge base to say, when you see certain symptoms, here's what you need to look at to see if we solved this before we have a workaround. So here I've made a few additions to my slides. So the known errors database is all about key relationships for workarounds. Here's what we found out about our investigation on a particular type of problem. And here's the symptoms that when you type in the keywords, you're going to match to out of problem management.
Hey, Graham, quick question around that. Just to clarify, is there not there is still overlap here between the incident process and the problem process, because I'm assuming for basic known errors that have really quick workarounds and don't have major business impact, they are still known errors that only stay at the incident process. They're never given to the problem process. Is that correct?
Again, problem management would look at it if it's business justified to look at.
But only
Otherwise,
if it's business justified. But there is the chance that there's a number of known errors with workarounds that have never gone into a justification for problem management.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And from that perspective, you may have from the development teams. Happened in my days of programming. You're under timelines to roll things out on time for the user community, and you roll it out with known bugs, right. And you think these bugs are unlikely to occur. So what problem management and ITIL promotes here is having one central location. So instead of leaving all of that knowledge with the development team, and then maybe by chance an incident ticket reports an error code that they can say, oh yeah, that was from testing. Well, if you've got the systems, so you need the tools here to make this work, but if you have the systems, you can put that information and the error codes into these the known errors database. It's basically a search engine. With the symptoms that would come up, what type of application, what service are we talking about, and then this would form for those development teams. They'll see which bugs they put out there, which they didn't think were going to happen, or which ones have happened and need to be fixed in the next version of the release.
Right.
So it's a one-stop knowledge of knowing, when did we put a bug out in the infrastructure? Let's have one source of knowledge for that. And then let's try and wrap around that the workarounds and the business case of whether or not we're going to try and fix it.
Okay.
And I think that's actually the next part of the slide here, because here's where I talk about part of these relationships is with release management, error codes. Because quite often in programming we put in an error code that when a certain line of code fails, it throws a number. So all those error codes and numbers can go into the known errors database as a central repository, and it becomes a search engine for incident management and problem management, and feeds back to release management. So all of those things from testing and later on being able to sequence, business justify what we need to update in our release. So our last sort of key success factor, I alluded to this already, we need to have a major incident problem where my belief is whenever you have a major incident, they should automatically trigger problem management to do an investigation, because the key thing here, we don't want these things to reoccur. So if the network goes out once a year, once every 5 years, we still want to do problem management because we just don't want that to happen. And it's business justified to look at investigating that.
And Graham, so is the key word here after? I mean, are you suggesting that problem management gets involved in big bold letters after the major incident has been resolved, or while it's happening?
In line.
In line.
Yeah. So as soon as a major incident is triggered, you want to trigger problem management, and you want to start putting. A major incident is going to require a lot of management decision making. You assemble teams on the fly. So incident management is going to focus on get the firefighters out there and put out the fire. At the same time, the major incident policy should also trigger problem management. And at the same time, problem management says, great, we're going to start putting our team together to do a thorough investigation of this, and we're not going to wait. We're going to do it now. because while we're setting one team aside to do things in a very logical, methodical, problem investigation way, and you've got the other incident management team running around just trying to put out the fire, it might be that the methodical team comes up with answers and solutions before the other folks running around with their head cut off. So, so you want to have both of these processes as business justified to trigger problem management right away, in line with incident management for the major incidents. So, so I think really that's where I'll wrap up. My presentation has a few more things about how do you document problem management and the basic process flows. But I think based on the topics and the key points that we want to talk about today, your success or failure with problem management is not the process flow. It's that first thing about what are we managing, when does an incident become a problem, and in the case of the printer investigation, if it's just a short thing that I've mapped users to a different printer, I come back to then follow up and try and get it running, you probably want to leave that under incident management. You don't need to trigger a separate problem type of activity because that becomes costly and time-consuming, where, again, there's not a business justification for it. So in wrap-up, we'll get to that, and then we'll see if any questions have come in on top of this. Hopefully I've whetted everyone's appetite for it.
Yeah, so Graham, we've got some questions here. If I can just, before we go to the summary here, because I'd like to get at it before people have to take off here. I'm just going to go through the list here, and if I've missed anybody, they can definitely contact Graham directly. There is a point here from Carol which says, in our organization, the management decision to assign resources to problems has to consider existing project backlog work. A problem might actually be considered, in quotes, a project. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Well, just off the top of my head, none of those words confuse me or conflict with anything I'm thinking. It is a project. This is a type of thing where problem management is methodical, thorough, and so it is a project. And again, it goes back to a key success factor. Problem management is the central focus point for all of the problem activities going on in the organization. So it goes back again to say, what are we managing? Here's another thought. Problem management doesn't have to create all of the problem tickets or the problem assignments. Again, I go back to my development days. I might be part of a development team. We have an application that we look after, and we've decided that we have enough of either a gut feel or enough feedback from our customers that we need to go and look at a couple of problems with a customer profile functionality. So what should happen in that case, you want problem management to know throughout the entire organization where are different people focusing on a project. So problem management should allow the development team to create a problem ticket that they assign back to themselves to say, here's work that we're doing. It's business justified because of our department role in the organization. And this way, if problem management has something come up and they need to see who's busy already on investigations, they have the dashboard. They have everything in front of them saying, here's all the activity and work going on throughout the organization. And each one of those assignments, each problem record is a project. Right? We're trying to get from an investigation to making a decision of what do we do. So actually a great question, because it just again says there's a difference between problem and incident management. Problem management can be very, very much project focused, and it can be created by IT staff and IT departments, whereas incident management doesn't do that. Incident management is task oriented. There's a fire, go put out the fire. They don't make decisions about accepting or refusing incidents. They just prioritize them and deal with everything. So very different in the way that these two processes work based upon what are they managing.
Okay, Graham, I'm going to try to fly through these some questions here. If I can ask you for you're only going to be allowed 30 to 30-second answers to these questions so that we can get through them all. So try to keep them brief. I can answer this one. Will the presentation be emailed to us? The answer is the presentation, all of these are recorded, and they are available in ThoughtRock. So if you just log into ThoughtRock, you can get in. If you don't have a ThoughtRock login, I'm sure there's many ways right now out in the industry you can get that ThoughtRock login ID. A lot of the associations have it as a bundle with their membership, so you can contact the ThoughtRock team at info@thoughtrock.net if you don't already have a membership, and they can help you out there. Having team members cross teams, example, firefighter team member can also be on the problem team. Better communication between teams would help this. I'm not sure if that was the question. I don't know if that was a question or a statement. Oh, here we go. Can also be on, well, Graham, do you understand that question? If you can, you might want to put something to that.
I think I understand. I think it's saying, with people, when can you take someone who's normally doing incident management and make them part of a problem-solving team? And problem management can make that decision. I wouldn't say there's anything wrong or specifically right with that. The challenge is, don't put someone on a problem-solving team who still has, at the same time, responsibility for incident management, so that every time they start focusing on something, their buzzer goes off, and then they have to change thought.
And skill set and all. I mean, Graham, you and I talked about that in terms of what we've seen in our own organizations when somebody who's been in the forest and can't see the forest from the trees tries to also problem solve, and something that could take a day with somebody else with a fresh approach sometimes takes a week. So definitely be careful.
Oh, exactly.
About that, right?
Yeah. Incident management. They're firefighters.
Yep. Shouldn't the major incident policy afford the problem management team the ability to conduct specific activities that may be bypassed by incident management? For example, data dumps.
I'm just trying to think about what is meant by data dumps. If it's in a backup nature or protective nature to try and make sure that while we're putting out the fires we don't damage anything, certainly that makes sense. It could be part of the major incident procedure itself, or it could be part of a problem management procedure. But yeah, the activities between incident and problem management don't have to be identical. Again, problem management is a methodical way of saying, let's go and methodically investigate these things, and just add this to your procedure. The first thing you should be doing with any critical systems when you're running around trying to reboot, load up new drivers, do things without a lot of time to consider, call it continuity management, but you want to have backups done before you start playing around with production systems. So I'm not sure if I've answered that, but that's how I understood the question to be.
Yeah, and if not, again, Graham, I think, well, first of all, it's info@thoughtrock.net, and then that additional comments or questions can get over to Graham. And Graham, you also, your email address, I'm not sure if it's on any of these slides, but if that's pulled up as well, then people have that if they want to contact you directly. So again, I want to thank you, Graham. Excellent job today, as usual.